Imagine, for a moment, that one morning you wake to discover the face staring back at you in the mirror is not really yours. The eyes are familiar, yes, but the sparkle in them seems borrowed from another's ambition. The smile feels rehearsed, like a line you've delivered 1,000 times, and the contours of your expression carry the weight of expectations that aren't truly yours. You rub your temples, heart pounding, as the room spins just a fraction, and you think, how long have I been playing this part? Beneath the neat haircut and crisp shirt, beneath the badges of status pinned to your lapel, lurks a question that breathes and pulses like an undercurrent in your veins. Who am I really, when I'm not performing for applause? This moment of unraveling, at once terrifying and exhilarating, marks the threshold between a life guided by the scripts handed to you and the raw, uncharted terrain of your own becoming. We all know, at some skeletal level, that we wear masks to navigate the world. From the moment we learn to say please and thank you, we slip into roles: sunny child, dutiful student, dependable friend, competent professional, loving partner, each persona designed to earn approval, deflect danger, or secure belonging. And yet, each time we don a mask, we pay a hidden price. A little piece of our genuine self quietly falls away, like grains of sand slipping through an hourglass. Over years, those grains pile into a dune so vast we can lose sight of the source beneath. Before we know it, the dune shifts and transforms until the face in the mirror belongs more to the collective expectations swirling around us than to the living, breathing soul behind them. In those moments when the dune cracks, when exhaustion overtakes the act, when a well-meaning compliment leaves you hollow, when a private tear sneaks out during the applause, you glimpse an essential truth. Belonging to the mask is not the same as being yourself. It's this pang of dissonance, this ache for authenticity, that Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist and pioneer of analytical psychology, placed at the very heart of his work. He recognized that beneath the careful choreography of social roles lies a deeper play, an interplay of light and shadow, of conscious intention and unconscious longing, calling us toward a more integrated wholeness. Jung called the face we show the world the persona, from the Latin for mask. That mask, he warned, can feel like a life jacket in a storm, a necessary layer of protection when waves of judgment and misunderstanding threaten to drown our fragile sense of self. Yet life jackets are not designed to become permanent armor. If we hitch ourselves too tightly to that persona, we risk forgetting how to swim the unguarded, exhilarating length of the human spirit. The irony is brutal. What seems to keep us safe can ultimately imprison us. And so we stand at this crossroads, poised between two worlds. On one side lies the familiar architecture of our constructed identity, the daily rituals, the social scripts, the habits perfected to win approval and maintain order. On the other lies the wild wilderness of our true self, the dreaming child within, the whispered longings we've silenced, the unclaimed talents gathering dust in neglected corners of our psyche. The first path offers comfort, certainty, and the soft glow of community acceptance, but at the cost of uprooting our deepest authenticity. The second path demands courage, vulnerability, and an openness to disorientation, but it offers the potential for a life that's genuinely ours, a life lived in vibrant alignment with our innermost values and desires. How do we choose? How do we summon the nerve to pry off the masks we've spent a lifetime polishing and present our raw, unvarnished selves to a world that may not know how to receive us? Jung's answer, paradoxically, was both simple and profound. We must embark on an inner journey, a process of individuation, in which we bring our unconscious into conscious awareness, integrate the hidden parts of our psyche, and reclaim the wholeness truncated by our earlier survival strategies. This process, as Jung described it, unfolds in stages, each one a descent into new territories of the self, where the masks we've habitually worn are gently, sometimes fiercely, peeled away. We begin by examining the very persona that's kept us afloat, the roles we adopted without question, the societal scripts we follow on autopilot. Then we turn inward, learning to distinguish between the cacophony of outside voices and the still, small voice of our authentic core. From there we confront the shadow, the parts of ourselves we've repressed or denied, and discover that what we've labeled as weakness or sin often contains untapped wells of creativity and strength. Next, we extend the hand of compassion to our wounded inner child, reopening channels of playfulness and spontaneity we locked away long ago. We learn to reconcile the polarities within us, masculine and feminine, logic and intuition, order and chaos, recognizing that true wholeness emerges not from denying one side but from allowing them to dance together in dynamic tension. Finally, as the tapestry of our psyche unfurls in new patterns, we stand poised at the emergence of the true self, a self no longer bound by the fear-driven compulsion to perform, but guided by an inner compass that points toward purpose, meaning, and sustained authenticity. Of course, this journey is neither quick nor easy. The path of individuation demands we confront the uncomfortable, challenge the familiar, and tolerate the uncertainty of peeling back layer after layer of self-deception. Yet for those brave enough to step across the threshold, the rewards are profound, a restored sense of vitality, a deepened capacity for intimacy, and the quiet yet unshakable conviction that you no longer need to hide from the world, or, more painfully, hide your world from yourself. As you listen to these words, you may feel a flicker of recognition, a tightening in your chest, or a gentle hope stirring in your belly. That's your unconscious mind nudging you, whispering that something within you knows this path is waiting. It doesn't matter whether you've spent decades perfecting your social masks or you're just beginning to wonder if there might be more to life than the roles you've assumed. The call to awaken to your true self speaks to every soul tethered by fear of rejection, every heart longing for genuine connection, every mind weary of pretense. So let's stand together at this threshold, you, poised on the brink of self-discovery, and the wisdom of Carl Jung guiding the way, offering a map not of the external world, but of the inner vistas where your authentic self awaits. In the chapters to come, we'll peel back the first mask you never even knew you wore, the mask of the persona, and in doing so, we'll set in motion the alchemy that transforms self-deception into radical self-knowing. Prepare, then, to lean into discomfort, to question everything you've taken for granted about who you are, and to open your heart to the possibility that beneath the elaborate facade lies a being more radiant, more complex, and more free than you ever imagined. Soon, we'll peer into that first mask, and in that gaze, you may glimpse the faint outline of the true self, beckoning you to step forward and claim your life, no stage directions attached. Querito espectador. Confira se você ainda está inscrito no canal. Às vezes, a inscrição pode ser cancelada automaticamente, então é sempre bom verificar. Aproveite e se torna membro do canal. Como membro, você terá benefícios incríveis, como assistir aos nossos conteúdos semanais. Além disso, você pode apoiar nosso trabalho sendo financiador do canal com value. Isso ajuda-nos permite investir em ferramentas melhores e elevar a qualidade de produção dos nossos conteúdos. Junte-se a nós nessa jornada e faça parte de nossa comunidade. E compartilhe gente ai nos comentários de que cidade você está escutando esta história e que horas são por aí agora. The mask of persona. We begin by lifting the veil on the first mask you never realized you wore, the persona. Picture it as a finely crafted glove, designed to fit snugly over your true hand, shaping each gesture, each handshake, each embrace to match what others expect. From the earliest days of our lives, we slip this glove on instinctively. A smile to earn approval. A nod to blend with the group. A practiced laugh to signal we belong. Yet beneath that protective glove, the real hand, the genuine contours of your heart, the unique lines of your passions, rests hidden, waiting. The persona feels safe, a form of social armor that whispers, play your part, and you'll survive. But at what cost to the vitality pulsing just beneath your skin? As children, we learn swiftly that certain faces bring praise, while others provoke frowns or worse, silence. We observed the world as avid little anthropologists, which mask delighted our parents, which mask comforted our friends, which mask even kept bullies at bay. Without consciously choosing, we borrowed scripts from siblings, teachers, peers, and the cultural echoes swirling around us. We practiced them in front of reflective surfaces. We mastered them before an audience of 2 or 20. Over time, we forgot the roles were borrowed at all. Our persona became us, or, more precisely, it became the only version of us that the world would politely applaud. Carl Jung coined the term persona from the Old Latin for a theatrical mask. He warned that this mask, though protective, can become a prison if we cling too tightly. The persona organizes our social reality, it smooths friction, avoids conflict, and grants us membership in the human community. Yet it also erects walls between the world and the elusive truths of our inner lives. With each performance, we trade a sliver of authenticity for the currency of acceptance. We learn to speak in cliches. We adopt metaphors not sprung from our own experience but borrowed from mass media or tradition. We recite phrases designed to signal intelligence or empathy, even when our hearts lie elsewhere. And what begins as a short-term survival tactic can calcify into a lifelong habit. Diagnosis, a social mechanism so seamless we scarcely notice its grip. We sift through dozens of masks before breakfast: professional mask, partner mask, parent mask, friend mask, only to switch to a new set by lunchtime. We balance these versions on a precarious scale, constantly weighing which facade will open doors and which will slam them shut. The process is exhausting. It fragments our sense of self. By the end of the day, we can barely recall who we were before each role demanded its performance. No wonder exhaustion accrues at the margins of our psyche, tiredness not just of body, but of spirit. We long for a moment when the mask slips and the soul can breathe. Yet most of us remain oblivious to the price we pay. We chalk our anxiety up to deadlines or traffic. We blame our alienation on insensitive bosses or unloving partners. Rarely do we connect the dots that lead back to the persona, the smooth facade we maintain at all costs. The persona is comfortable until it isn't, until a single crack reveals the chasm between appearance and essence. That crack can open in a sudden outburst of anger or tears, in the awkward silence after a compliment, and the hollowness that follows applause. It feels like the ground shifting beneath us. We wonder, if the mask falls away, what remains? Who am I without it? Transformation begins with that question. It's the moment you pause mid-performance and realize you've been playing a part not of your own writing. You might glimpse that realization in an empty hotel room, in the glow of a computer screen at 2 a.m., or in the stillness of a Sunday morning devotion to nothing but coffee and your spinning thoughts. When the mask loosens, you catch the faintest scent of a different self, a presence you once knew before roles and expectations weighed you down. That scent, the aroma of unaccustomed freedom, beckons you toward deeper inquiry. The path forward doesn't demand you discard the persona outright. After all, we all need roles to negotiate relationships and responsibilities. Instead, Jung invites us to examine each mask with curious detachment. Ask yourself, where did this mask originate? Whose voice scripted these lines? What fears does it guard against? What desires does it shield? By posing such questions, you shift from automatic performance to mindful observation. You become both actor and audience, noticing the parts you play while steadily reclaiming authorship of your story. Consider a metaphor. You're a skilled actor in an ongoing play that you didn't write. To find your authentic voice, you must first learn the script by heart, then step off the stage into the quiet backstage corridor, reading the margins, rewriting scenes, and finally ascending into the light again, but this time as playwright and performer both. That second ascent feels different. It's less buoyed by the applause of an audience conditioned to expect the same tired lines. Instead, you ascend with a quiet confidence born of ownership. The next scenes you choose to enact resonate more with your true self, even if they meet with initial resistance or confusion from others who preferred the old performance. Practical exercise: identify your primary masks. Maybe one is the always helpful persona, eager to solve problems, yet secretly resentful when your efforts go unnoticed. Another might be the agreeable one, perpetually nodding, even when your soul screams to dissent. Write each mask on a separate piece of paper and list the origins: childhood praise, professional reward systems, cultural expectations. Then sit with each paper and say aloud, I wore this to gain X, I lose Y by wearing it. Notice how your body reacts. Does your chest tighten, your breath shorten? That's the persona's hold on you. Breathe into the sensation, naming it, and let the weight lighten. Emotional tension builds as we confront truths we've long evaded. It's one thing to admit intellectually that you've been performing. It's another to face the loneliness of relinquishing a mask that once protected you. You might fear rejection more acutely than ever. Questions swirl. If I speak my real mind, will I lose relationships? If I admit I don't care about the things I once pretended to, will my social circle drift away? Jung reminds us that authenticity often requires a painful culling of connections that were never right for us. But he also promises that in shedding inauthentic ties, we clear space for relationships rooted in genuine mutual recognition. Existentially, we stand at a crossroads: continue carrying the persona like a life raft, or test our ability to swim unencumbered. The fear of sinking looms large, yet the risk holds the promise of self-possession. The persona, after all, is an artifact of survival, not fulfillment. And although its scripts can feel safe, they can never lead us to the deepest wells of living. That territory lies beyond the stage lights, and the shadows and quiet spaces where the true self whispers. Begin with small acts of unveiling. Speak a truth you've been avoiding. I'm not comfortable with that plan. I feel differently than you. Or even, I don't have all the answers. Notice how your voice sounds when it carries your own conviction. Let your body remember the alignment of words and feelings. Observe the reactions you receive, and distinguish between constructive feedback and knee-jerk resistance. Each moment of candid expression chisels away at the persona's rigidity and adds strength to your emerging core. As you practice, you may find that some relationships grow stronger, infused with the honesty they subconsciously craved. Others may waver or falter. That's part of the reckoning. The persona has brokered many of your connections on terms of impression management. When you shift the terms, the bond must either renegotiate or dissolve. While this process can feel destabilizing, it clears away unhealthy dependencies. In the newfound lightness, you discover allies who value you for your true face, not the mask you once wore. Here's a guiding reflection. Imagine a conversation with your persona sitting across from you at a cafe. What would it say? Would it plead for survival, warning of dangers if you change your act? Would it boast of how well it served you? Listen with compassion. Recognize that the persona formed to protect you in volatile environments. Thank it for its service, then explain that the world you now navigate rewards authenticity more than safe mimicry. Gradually, you'll learn to distance yourself from the persona's chatter, tuning instead to the quieter notes of your own inner voice. The journey of peeling back the first mask is fraught with discomfort. It's like removing a second skin that's adhered so tightly you scarcely recall what lay beneath. Yet with each layer shed, your breath deepens, your posture uncoils, and a sense of visceral aliveness returns. The raw hues of your emotions, joy, grief, longing, rage, no longer muted behind a filter of caution. You begin to sense the landscape of your psyche as a terrain worthy of exploration, its contours sacred rather than shameful. Of course, the persona will not vanish completely. That would be neither possible nor desirable. We need a dynamic persona, one flexible enough to navigate the world's demands without obliterating our essence. The goal is not to rip off the mask in one violent motion, but to cultivate conscious choice. When do I wear a version of myself for social ease, and when do I stand naked in my truths? This oscillation between masks and unmasked presence becomes an art, a dance in which you learn to adapt fluidly, always returning to the center of your authenticity. As we close this chapter on the mask of persona, remember this: the persona you shed today may reappear tomorrow, disguised in new expectations and fresh anxieties. The work of individuation is ongoing. Each morning brings a new test. Will you default to the old script or pause to ask, is this truly mine? Remaining alert to that question keeps the persona a servant, not a master. And it propels you toward the profound journey that lies ahead, venturing beyond social roles into the silent chambers of your being, where self-awareness flickers like a candle in a dark cathedral. Next, we'll journey inward, toward the hidden dialogues within, the stillness that whispers in contrast to the persona's performance, and the nascent self-awareness awaiting those brave enough to listen. Part 2. The path to self-awareness. You've glimpsed the thin veneer of the persona, felt its weight and heard its mechanical creak when it shifts against your essence. Now, imagine stepping off the stage entirely and finding yourself in a hushed antechamber, the place where every mask falls into shadow. The first breath you draw here tastes of questions. Who am I beneath the applause? Which voice in my head truly belongs to me, and which have I borrowed from a choir of expectations? This chamber is both sanctuary and crucible, for it invites you to listen to the hesitations, the secret longings, the murmurs of a self you barely recognize. The path to self-awareness demands we plunge into this stillness, learn its language, and discover that within the silence lies the pulse of our own becoming. All our lives, we've chased external validation, the nod of approval, the favorable review, the invisible tally of likes and follows. Each compliment we collect becomes a stepping stone across a river of self-doubt, but what happens when the current runs dry? When the echo chamber of praise falls silent, we find ourselves stranded with the only voice left to hear, our own. And sometimes, that voice is a stranger. We've tuned our frequency to the stations of public opinion so assiduously that we've forgotten how to discern the wavelength of our own heart. The problem, Jung might say, is that we've mistaken the persona's amplifier for our authentic speaker, turning up borrowed volume to disguise the whisper of true self-expression. The philosophical challenge here is profound. Do we continue supplying fuel to an engine built by others, or do we pause the production line and attend to the original blueprint of our desires? Jung's map of the psyche divides the mind into realms of consciousness and unconsciousness, but the frontier between them is alive with possibility. Self-awareness begins when we learn to observe our own mental traffic, those swift thoughts, gut reactions, and emotional tremors that erupt without warning. Rather than fleeing from discomfort, we turn toward it, curious as an explorer in unmapped terrain, noting each sensation as if it were a landmark, a signal flare pointing toward deeper self-knowledge. Diagnosing the mechanism of our distraction requires honesty. Notice how, when faced with quiet, your mind floods with chatter, doubts about your worth, rehearsed defenses against imagined critics, future anxieties projecting calamity. These mental echoes are not your core, they are the reverberations of the persona's protective walls. Like a radio left between stations, your psyche picks up static, fragments of old scripts, conditioned fears, parental admonitions. You might hear, "Don't speak up, you'll look foolish," or "Achieve more or you'll never be enough." Each slogan was stamped on the tape of your early mind, but they still play on repeat until you consciously reach out and press pause. And so we come to practice, the art of silent self-observation. Begin by carving out a few stolen minutes each day, no agenda, no phone, no background noise. Sit comfortably, close your eyes, and simply watch. Observe how your breath rises and falls, how thoughts drift in like clouds, how emotions surface like fish in a pond. Don't judge what appears, label it gently, thinking, worry, sadness, then let it pass. This act of witnessing creates a gap between impulse and reaction, a crack in the facade where genuine presence can seep through. With each session, that gap widens, and your capacity to respond from your true center grows stronger. Imagine for a moment that you're a musician tuning an instrument. If the strings are too tight, they snap. Too loose, they drone. But when they're aligned just right, they resonate with clarity. Your psyche is the instrument, and self-awareness is the tuning fork. When you learn to harmonize with your own inner notes, the discordant beats of external pressure fall away. You become attuned to subtler frequencies, your own creative impulses, your authentic emotional resonance, the quiet urgings of your soul. And in that resonance, you find a compass pointing toward choices that align with your true values rather than the shifting whims of others. Of course, silence can feel like exposure. The moment you stop performing for an audience, real or imagined, you confront the vacuum of unfulfilled potential. Anxiety may flare as you realize you've spent decades suppressing the less palatable parts of yourself, the dreams you abandoned, the anger you denied, the grief you shoved beneath the carpet of "I'm fine." This emotional tension is not a sign of failure, it's a beacon indicating the void where self-knowledge longs to grow. Lean into it. Let the tightness in your chest speak its truth. Each discomfort you meet with compassionate curiosity turns raw edges into doorways. On this path, journaling becomes a trusted companion. When thoughts swirl turbulently, capture them in writing as if you were eavesdropping on your own mind. Don't censor or prettify, let the pen trace every jagged line, your resentments, your secret aspirations, your recurring doubts. After the ink dries, read your words back to yourself with kindness, as if you were listening to a dear friend pour out their heart. In that act of compassionate witnessing, you witness not only your psyche's turmoil, but also its yearning for integration. What passages spark recognition? Which lines make you wince? Those reactions illuminate the thresholds between persona and emerging self. Philosophers and mystics have long described this moment as the dawn of the witnessing ego, the part of you that stands apart from your thoughts and feelings, simply observing. Jung called it the transcendent function, a bridge between the conscious mind and the vast expanse of unconscious potential. When you engage this function, you allow previously opposing elements, reason and intuition, fear and courage, doubt and faith, to dialogue within you. This inner conversation sparks creativity, guiding you not toward a single right answer, but toward a deeper harmony that honors complexity rather than erasing it. Active imagination is another tool Jung offered, a deliberate invitation to personify parts of your psyche and let them speak. You might visualize your inner critic as a stern teacher, your wounded child as a trembling figure, your longing for freedom as a soaring bird. Engage them in conversation, ask questions, listen to complaints, offer reassurance. What does your inner critic fear losing? What does your child need to feel safe? What songs does the bird long to sing? These dialogues breathe life into previously unconscious fragments, weaving them into a tapestry of self-understanding. Yet self-awareness is not a one-time achievement, it's an ongoing cycle of inquiry. In the morning, you may wake with certainties born of yesterday's epiphanies, only to find by nightfall that life has challenged them. A difficult conversation, an unexpected setback, a sudden joy, all can shift your inner terrain. Rather than seeing these fluctuations as failures, welcome them as invitations to deepen your listening. The path of self-awareness demands humility, a willingness to be surprised by yourself, to admit you don't have a permanent blueprint, but rather an evolving map that you redraw with each new insight. Notice how, as you cultivate this practice, your relationships begin to change. You speak more honestly, align your actions with your values, and hold firmer boundaries when necessary. Some people might resist your shift. They miss the predictable script you once performed. Others will gravitate toward the authenticity you now embody, finding relief in the space you've created for genuine connection. These reactions serve as reflections, teaching you where old personas still cling and where new authenticity has already taken root. Emotional tension remains, of course, because self-awareness peels back layers that have protected us from our own depths. You might grieve the loss of certain illusions, such as the belief that everyone should admire you, or that your worth hinges on achievement. That grief is natural, it's the price we pay for growth. Honor it. Sit with it. Let it tenderize your heart so you can hold both your shadows and your light with equal compassion. In that balanced embrace, you discover the seeds of genuine self-esteem and a steadier compass for your life. As your self-awareness matures, you begin to notice subtle shifts in your decision-making. Impulsive reactivity gives way to deliberate pauses. You distinguish between what your persona craves, status, approval, performance, and what your authentic self desires, meaning, alignment, creative expression. Choices that once felt urgent lose their grip. You learn to wait for that inner clarity, that felt sense in your gut or the calm whisper that says, "This is mine." And when you act from that place, even small decisions reverberate with an unmistakable sense of rightness. Yet a crucial realization emerges: self-awareness alone is not the final destination. It opens the door to the vast vestibule of the unconscious, where hidden forces stir and ancient fears lurk. We've learned to watch our thoughts, to dialogue with interior voices, to align with our true values, but beneath the surface still lies that other realm, the one we've locked away because we feared its power. This territory is darker than any persona's theater, more unpredictable than the mind's everyday chatter. It is the domain Carl Jung called the shadow, the reservoir of repressed impulses, disowned gifts, and unacknowledged flaws. So as you stand in the hush of your own awareness, take a breath and steel yourself for what comes next. You've built the capacity to observe without reacting, you've begun the dialogue with your psyche's disparate parts, and you've tasted the liberation of acting from inner truth rather than external script. Now the path bends downward into the underworld of the self, where integration demands you meet the side you've long refused to see. It's the ultimate test of self-awareness. Will you face the darker currents within, or will you turn back to the safety of your well-tuned performance? The shadows await. And beyond them, the promise of profound transformation. As you stand in the hush of your own awareness, a low rumble stirs beneath the surface, a subtle tremor that whispers of deeper currents. You've tuned your instrument, learned to listen, and now find yourself poised at the mouth of a cavern, the realm Carl Jung called the shadow. This is no bedtime story. It's the dark side of your own psyche, a subterranean river of repressed impulses, unlived passions, and disowned qualities you've locked away for a lifetime. And here's the universal sting. The very parts of yourself you've denied and buried are the same parts that shape your fate, driving your fears, fueling your judgments, and steering your behavior when you aren't looking. If you reject this darkness, it controls you from below the waterline. If you bring it into the light, you transform it, and yourself, in ways you barely dare imagine. Think of the shadow as that neglected wing of a grand house you inherited but never entered. It's dusty, cluttered with the residue of old wounds and inherited taboos. In that wing lie treasures, raw creativity, authentic anger that defends boundaries, erotic vitality, intuitive wisdom that you disowned when you first learned what would earn approval. You stuffed them in locked trunks marked shame, fear, or guilt. Then you forgot the keys even existed. Outside, you constructed a neat facade, the reliable worker, the pleasant partner, the polite friend. Meanwhile the wing crumbled, its hidden corridors inhabited by ghosts that whisper half-truths into your dreams and judgments into your waking moments. You see the mechanism at work every day. A coworker brushes past you, and inexplicable rage flares in your chest. You judge someone's parenting choices with fierce certainty. You recoil from a flirtatious comment as though it's poison, even though a deeper part of you craves connection. These eruptions feel foreign, as if you've lost control, but in truth it's your shadow rising up. What you refuse to accept in yourself, you project onto others. The more you deny that raw pulse of anger, or that hunger for spontaneity, the more power it has over you. You become a marionette, dancing on strings of unacknowledged impulses. Yet the shadow isn't a villain to be exorcised. It's a rich soil for growth. Jung insisted that in every denied flaw lies a seed of potential. The bully you suppress may contain the inner authority you need to enforce healthy boundaries. The jealous flame you smother may light your passion for creation. The fear you refuse to feel may herald the very courage that propels you into new lives. Integration doesn't mean indulging every impulse. It means recognizing what stirs beneath, welcoming its message, and channeling it consciously. But let's be honest, this descent into darkness feels terrifying. You've spent years shoring up those walls, rehearsing polite scripts, and numbing discomfort with distractions, endless scrolling, frantic schedules, social masks. Now you're being asked to turn off the noise, walk down the dim hallways, and peer into rooms you've always feared. Your heart may pound. Your mind may scream, stop. Go back to the light. You might envision yourself swallowed by the shadows, losing moral compass, emerging as someone unrecognizable. This fear is real, and by facing it, you step beyond paralysis into potency. How, then, do we embark on this journey without losing ourselves? Jung offers practical tools. First, notice your projections. Whenever you find yourself hating something in another, arrogance, neediness, cruelty, pause and ask, Where else have I lived this? Map out the moments when you displayed similar traits, however subtle. Perhaps you dismissed a friend's ideas out of fear they'd outshine you, or you demanded perfection in someone else to mask your own shame. Projection is the psyche's smoke alarm, blaring whenever repressed content surfaces in the external world. Respond with curiosity rather than accusation. Thank you for showing me where I still need healing. Next, harness your dreams. In sleep, the shadow speaks without restraint. A friend morphs into a snake, a childhood home floods with oil, you're chased by faceless figures, you wake unsettled, drenched in symbols. Keep a journal by your bed. As soon as you stir, capture every image, emotion, and fragment of dialogue. Later, sit with each symbol and ask, what part of me does this represent? If a snake appears, maybe it's your dormant erotic energy or fears of betrayal. If oil floods your living room, perhaps your creativity feels contaminated. Let these nocturnal messages guide you toward the corridors of your shadow. Active imagination offers another route. With pen in hand or in silent meditation, invite a dialogue with an aspect of your shadow. Picture it as a wounded child, a snarling dog, a regal monarch, whatever image arises. Greet it respectfully, I see you there. What do you need? Listen without judgment. Offer compassion, I'm here to understand. In this inner meeting, the shadow often reveals the protective role it played, safeguarding you from rejection or pain. Thank it for its service, then invite it to join you as ally rather than hidden saboteur. Metaphor can be a powerful guide. Imagine your psyche as a castle with a great moat. You've built drawbridges, your persona, your self-control, that keep the dark waters at bay. Now the drawbridges are rusty, the guards uncertain, and the moat rising with strange currents. You must lower the bridge, wade into the waters, and retrieve the sunken treasures beneath. Yes, the water is cold and murky, but the gold you find, your authentic power, will light up your entire life. Emotional tension intensifies as you move deeper. You might finally feel the grief you never allowed yourself to mourn, the loss of childhood dreams, of aspects of yourself you abandoned to fit in. Anger may erupt, righteous and raw, at old injustices and self-betrayals. Shame may surface, condemning you for owning these emotions at all. Let them come. Move your body, shout, cry, punch a pillow. These physical acts anchor you in reality, reminding you that you're alive and capable of holding the storm. As the tide of feeling rises and falls, you learn that emotions are not enemies to banish but messengers bearing gifts. Gradually, as you tend the shadow, integration emerges. You begin to reclaim disowned energies. That smoldering anger transforms into assertiveness that enforces healthy boundaries without aggression. That buried sensuality breathes life into relationships that once felt sterile. That silent resentment becomes fuel for creative projects you'd long sidelined. You feel a new wholeness, less fragile and more flexible, able to navigate both light and dark with equal grace. Throughout this process, practice self-compassion. The shadow often holds traumas and vulnerabilities you repress to survive. Speak to yourself as you would to a close friend in pain. I'm sorry you had to hide. You deserve to be seen. This tenderness dissolves defensive walls and softens the shadow's resistance. Remember, the darkest corners of your psyche are not barren wastelands, but fertile fields awaiting the light of awareness. And here's the crux, we all share this underworld. Every spiritual tradition tells of a descent, Orpheus into Hades, Buddha's confrontation with Mara, Elijah fleeing into the wilderness. These myths map our interior odyssey. You are the hero standing at the threshold, your trembling hand on the latch of a door long sealed. Will you turn the knob, cross the threshold, and walk into the unknown? Jung's answer is a resounding yes, for the gold of individuation lies at the journey's darkest point. Which part of yourself have you most feared? Maybe it's the anger you were taught to swallow. Maybe it's the grandiosity you labeled as vanity, even though it hints at your true potential. Or it could be the grief you shoved beneath deadlines and distractions, convincing yourself there's no time to feel. Identify this trait, name it, feel its weight, and ask, how might this quality serve me if I welcomed it? Let that question echo in your heart like a bell, calling you forward. As you integrate the shadow, you'll notice subtle shifts in your relationships. Conflicts may surface as old patterns dissolve. Some people will resist the new you, others will celebrate your authenticity. Trust that this pruning is necessary. The ties that held you in half-truths will give way to bonds that honor your full spectrum of light and dark. In time, your moral compass recalibrates. Instead of rigidly labeling experiences as good or bad, you learn to perceive the grain of divine intent in every impulse. The line between saint and sinner blurs as you recognize both reside within. In that space between, you discover a profound equilibrium that transcends judgment, a place Jung called the self, the organizing center of the psyche. Of course, this work never ends. The shadow is always lurking at the edges, ready to rise when you least expect it. But now you possess the lantern of awareness. When the shadows lengthen, you hold the light, ready to welcome old friends, heal old wounds, and reclaim the gifts that once hid in darkness. So, as you shake off the last remnants of denial and welcome the hidden chambers of your soul, remember that the deepest power lies in embracing your whole self. You are not flawed, you are complex. In your shadow dwell your mightiest strengths, waiting for you to claim them. The question now is not whether you'll face this darker territory, but how courageously you'll do so, and how fully you'll emerge on the other side. And once you own your shadow, the final boundary beckons, an even more tender frontier where your wounded inner child waits to be heard and healed. Imagine for a moment that beneath your poised, composed exterior, there's a smaller you, a version of yourself from years ago, still crouched in the corner of a dimly lit room, clutching the tattered remains of a favorite toy. That child, fragile and wide-eyed, once believed the world revolved around your every smile and tear. Somewhere along the way, grown-ups taught you to silence your cries, to tuck away your laughter until it fit the moment. Now, as an adult, you've armored yourself with self-control, reason, and polish, but that child remains, waiting for someone to notice. The most profound transformation begins when you stop and say, I see you, little one. I'm here. That invitation, simple yet radical, breaks through layers of self-reproach and perfectionism. Too often we shove our childhood wounds into a locked trunk marked irrelevant, as though the hurts of 8 or 10 or 15 don't matter once we learn to drive, graduate, or climb the corporate ladder. But those early cracks in our hearts shape how we trust, how we love, how we set boundaries. The inner child carries the blueprint of our original longings, and until we attend to those unmet needs, we circulate through life half-present, forever chasing the affection or approval we missed when scraped knees and stuttering words felt like the end of the world. Picture that inner child as an old photograph, a snapshot fading at the edges, colors bleeding into sepia. You might tilt your head, squinting at the image, wondering if it's really you. Yet when you press your palm against the glass, you feel a flicker of recognition, a quiet ache that says, I remember this pain. That pain isn't a liability, it's a map. It points to the moments when you learned to hide your true feelings, when tears were met with admonishment, when dreams were dismissed, when your small voice was told to be quiet. Those moments forged defensive masks that kept you safe then but now keep you fragmented. So how do we bridge the gap between the steely adult and the tender child? Jung offered a doorway called active imagination, but we can start with gentler tools, like writing a letter. Take a paper and pen and, as if you were addressing a beloved friend, let your hand move without judgment. Speak directly to that younger self. I'm sorry you were scared when no one came to your bedtime. I wish someone had told you that your voice mattered. Feel each syllable as you write. You might find your hand trembling or tears pooling in the corners of your eyes. That's the armor cracking. Don't rush to tidy up the letter. Let the raw edges remain visible. After you finish, fold the letter gently and place it somewhere meaningful, a bookmark in a favorite book, a drawer you open every morning, or simply on your bedside table. Then choose a time to read it aloud, perhaps in front of a mirror. Hear the words spoken with compassion, and allow yourself to cradle that vulnerable figure inside. Notice how your voice softens when you acknowledge the child's pain. Notice how your chest expands with relief when you offer the reassurance you never received. In these moments, self-compassion becomes a tangible practice, not just an abstract idea. Another path to dialogue with the inner child is through play. Remember how you felt when you built forts out of blankets or sketched imaginary worlds with crayons? You didn't worry about the outcome, you simply reveled in creation. As an adult, you might resist play, calling it a luxury or childish indulgence. But play is medicine. It dissolves the rigid scripts imposed by responsible adulthood and reconnects you to spontaneous joy. Even 5 minutes of dancing to a silly song, jumping on a bed, or molding clay can awaken the buried delight that fuels creativity and emotional resilience. If you feel self-conscious beginning with play, try guided visualization. Close your eyes and picture a garden bathed in golden light. See a small child peeking out from behind a tree, curious, hesitant, hopeful. Approach slowly, speak softly, I'm your grown-up now, and I've come to keep you safe. Offer a hand, and imagine that child stepping forward to join you. In that shared space, ask, what do you want me to know? What hurts do you need me to heal? Listen not with logic but with a gentle openness. Trust the images or sensations that arise, perhaps a memory, a word, or a feeling. Let them surface without analysis. Then thank your inner child for speaking. As the dialogue deepens, you may uncover patterns that still govern your life. Maybe that child feared abandonment, so you strive to please others at the expense of your own needs. Or perhaps you felt silenced, so now every time you want to express disagreement, you shrink back. Recognizing these patterns isn't about blame, it's about reclamation. You're no longer trapped by the script written in childhood, you're the editor now. Acknowledge each fear, then ask, what support do you need? What boundary would protect you? Offer the answers with kindness, even if they feel foreign at first. Emotional tension will rise as you rediscover these old wounds. You might feel grief so deep it seems to come from your bones. You might feel anger at caregivers who couldn't give you what you needed. Let yourself experience these emotions fully. Cry into a pillow, journal until your wrist aches, scream into the night air if you must. These cathartic expressions are not regressions, they're breakthroughs. The energy once locked in suppression now flows free, clearing the debris that obscured your vitality. Once you've acknowledged and ministered to the child's pain, you can begin to nurture their unclaimed gifts. That shy child who hid behind books may have had an imaginative mind waiting to become a writer or artist. The spirited kid who was scolded for telling tall tales may have been an innate storyteller, meant to spin narratives that uplift others. Ask your inner child, what did you love that I let go of? What dreams did I bury? Then list 1 or 2 small ways to resurrect those joys. Spend 10 minutes painting, write a few lines of a story, sing into your shower. Let the child's enthusiasm guide you. Healing the inner child also reshapes your relationships. You used to scold yourself for being too sensitive or overreacting, but now you recognize that sensitivity is a strength. It's the gateway to empathy, connection, and genuine creativity. When someone triggers an old wound, say, a dismissive comment that echoes a childhood dismissal, you can pause and say, I see there's an old pain here. You don't have to explain it to others, simply naming it to yourself softens the reactivity. You respond from maturity rather than defensiveness, and in doing so, you redefine intimacy on your terms. In daily life, integrate this healing by checking in with your inner child before making choices. That voice inside that urges caution might actually be fear speaking, differentiated from your true caution, wisdom born of experience. Likewise, that voice demanding approval might be the echo of a lonely child seeking reassurance, not the sound of adult conviction. Ask yourself, is this decision aligned with my genuine desires, or am I appeasing an old wound? Over time, this habit rewires your instincts, fostering authenticity in everything you do. Of course, rescuing the inner child isn't a one-and-done event. It's an ongoing relationship that waxes and wanes like the tides of the sea. Some days you'll feel close, confident, and playful. Other days the child might sulk in the corner, uncertain if they can trust you again. On those days, extend extra kindness, offer a simple gift like a walk in nature, a cup of hot cocoa, or a favorite childhood song. Let the childhood part of you know it's valued, even when it feels shaky. As you tend to those early wounds with compassion, a remarkable shift occurs. The defensive masks you've worn slip more easily, because the child inside no longer fears exposure. You find yourself speaking your truths with less hesitation, embracing vulnerability as a sign of courage rather than weakness. Your creativity blossoms, since the parts of you that once painted in secret or whispered stories into pillows now breathe unrestrained air. And perhaps most importantly, you taste a sweetness in life you thought belonged only to nostalgic memories. Yet this healing also reveals a new frontier. With the inner child held safely in your adult arms, you are now prepared for the next challenge Jung described, the reconciliation of opposites within your psyche. Masculine and feminine energies, intuition and logic, order and chaos, these polarities have lived in uneasy coexistence, and they crave integration. The inner child's innocence softens the rigid boundaries you once needed, opening passageways for once opposed elements to dance together. But before that dance can begin, you must hold both your tender vulnerability and your mature strength in balance, recognizing that each complements the other. So take a moment now to feel into your heart. Notice the steady pulse of your adult self, strong and guiding. Notice also the gentle flicker of your inner child, curious and open. Let those two parts breathe in tandem, finding harmony. Then look ahead and ask yourself, how will I invite the wounded child and the wise adult to co-create my life? In that question lies the threshold to a deeper wholeness, one where play and purpose, sensitivity and resilience, innocence and experience merge into a new alchemy. And as you stand at that threshold, you sense the work that awaits, the art of uniting the dueling forces within, forging a dynamic unity from what once felt like irreconcilable opposites. The journey is far from over. In fact, it's only just beginning. The next chapter beckons you to embrace that tension, to let contradictions spark creativity, and to weave a tapestry of selfhood richer than you ever imagined. Stay tuned, for beyond the inner child lies the fertile ground of integration, where your true wholeness awaits. Part 5. Reconciliation of opposites. As you cradle your inner child's tenderness in one hand and your adult wisdom in the other, you arrive at a crossroads where the polarities within your soul beckon, each demanding recognition, each craving its own voice. Here lies the fertile tension between light and dark, restraint and abandon, logic and intuition, masculine drive and feminine receptivity. You've met your shadows and soothed your childhood wounds. Now the task is to weave these once opposed forces into a living tapestry of wholeness. This is the alchemical marriage within, a dance of opposites that, when held together, sparks the emergence of something radically new. We all know the pain of choosing one extreme over the other. When you cling too tightly to order, busy schedules, color-coded calendars, unbending plans, you may avoid chaos, but at the cost of spontaneity, insight, and joy. Conversely, when you surrender entirely to freedom, impulsive adventures, unscheduled mornings, reckless creativity, you risk losing coherence, stability, and trust in your own capacity to follow through. These patterns play out in relationships, work, and self-esteem. The perfectionist who can never relax, the dreamer who never finishes, the critic who distrusts vulnerability, the empath who collapses under overwhelm. The split fractures your identity and fragments your energy, leaving you spinning between too much and not enough. Carl Jung described this inner fragmentation as a refusal to embrace the polarity that fuels psychic dynamism. He spoke of the anima and animus, those inner feminine and masculine archetypes residing in every psyche, as essential partners, not adversaries. Like magnetic poles, their tension generates the creative spark of life. The mistake is to treat one pole as villain, the other as hero, when in truth both are indispensable. Individuation unfolds when we invite these hidden counterparts into dialogue rather than exile or projection. In alchemy, the union of sun and moon births a golden elixir. In the psyche, the marriage of opposites births a self no longer torn but thriving. Diagnosing your own mechanism of division begins with noticing where you habitually react with yes or no extremes. Do you dismiss your feelings as irrational or oversensitive? Do you deride logical analysis as cold and controlling? Do you view structure as oppressive or spontaneity as irresponsible? These judgments reveal internal exile. You split aspects of yourself into good and bad, then project whichever side you fear onto others. A partner's assertiveness feels domineering if you've long repressed your own drive. A friend's fluid creativity seems chaotic if you've buried your own urge to play. That projection fuels misunderstanding and conflict, keeping you from the very wholeness you crave. Imagine an architect who refuses to blend steel and glass, insisting on one or the other. The result would be a building unsuited for light or strength, brittle under stress. Your psyche works the same way. Lean only into logic and you lose the translucent beauty of feeling. Surrender only to emotion and you forfeit the structural integrity of reason. The solution isn't to pick a side but to learn the art of synthesis. You become both architect and artist, weaving beams of rational thought through the stained glass windows of intuition. Practical integration begins with simple exercises of inner dialogue. Set aside a journal and divide the page in two, left for order, right for chaos. On the left, list your habits of structure, morning routines, prioritize to-do lists, your penchant for rules. On the right, capture your impulses toward spontaneity, daydreams, creative bursts, times you broke the script and felt alive. Sit with each column without judgment. Notice where the energy in your chest tightens or loosens. Then draw arrows between entries. How might these qualities inform one another? Perhaps your meticulous planning could be leavened with an hour of unstructured play. Maybe your wild ideas deserve a framework that brings them into form. In that mapping, you glimpse the terrain where opposites converge. Another doorway to reconciliation is movement. Think of a dancer shifting between fluid, flowing motions and sharp, angular gestures. Each quality intensifies the other. Embody order and chaos in your body by practicing a few minutes of free-form dance, then transitioning into a slow, deliberate stretch or yoga sequence. Feel how spontaneity ignites joy in your muscles, and how focused posture restores calm in your nerves. This physical communion trains your nervous system to tolerate, and even delight in, the interplay of extremes. In everyday choices, practice toggling between poles. If you're the sort who jumps headlong into new projects, pause today and schedule a pocket of stillness, 5 minutes of meditation, a quiet walk, a single deep breath before answering an email. If you're wired for caution and you've deferred a risk, pick one small adventure, send an honest text, try a new recipe, speak your truth in a meeting. Notice the subtle alchemy that arises when you honor both your craving for stability and your longing for novelty. Over time, those microdoses of balance cultivate a supple, adaptive psyche. Of course, emotional tension will surface. When you stretch yourself between extremes, you might feel torn. A part of you clings to the safety of old habits, another part pulses with restless yearning. This tension is not a flaw, it's the crucible of transformation. Jung likened it to the liminal space between dream and waking, where the most vivid insights are born. Lean into the discomfort as you would lean into a massage. The tender spots are precisely where change happens. Breathe into the tension, naming it. This is my need for safety, this is my thirst for freedom, and feel the energy shift from paralyzing conflict into dynamic potential. A potent metaphor for reconciliation is the ocean tide. On its own, the inland river cannot mirror the sea's vastness, the sea alone cannot descend into narrow riverbanks. Only at the estuary, where fresh and salt water meet, does the ecosystem flourish in surprising abundance. Your inner opposites need such an estuary, a creative meeting place where contrasting energies dissolve just enough to generate renewal. Cultivate your own psychic estuary by creating rituals that blend extremes, listening to an impromptu jam session after reviewing your strategic plan, scheduling playful doodling next to a detailed budget spreadsheet, writing free verse poetry in the margins of a meticulously annotated report. As this integration deepens, you'll notice life itself becomes more vibrant. Decisions feel less like agonizing dilemmas and more like invitations to responsive dance. You no longer ask, which side am I on, but rather, how can both sides inform this moment? When faced with conflict, you access both your empathic understanding and your boundary-setting clarity. When crafting a vision, you combine visionary leaps with methodical follow-through. Your energy, once scattered between extremes, now flows in spirals, circumambulating each pole while never losing sight of the others. In relationships, your newfound balance radiates a magnetic field that attracts complementary energies rather than familiar dramas. You speak truths softened by empathy and enforce boundaries colored by flexibility. You welcome partners who may be more spontaneous or more structured than you, seeing in them not threats but opportunities to extend your own capacity. Together you co-create solutions that honor both need for predictability and craving for adventure. Yet remember that integration is not a final state. The wheel of life turns, seasons shift, and new challenges emerge. There will be times when one pole will feel especially alluring, and the other will feel more like an alien land. That is precisely the invitation to revisit your inner dialogue, to practice curiosity instead of reactivity. Ask yourself, which side am I neglecting? Which one am I over-identifying with? In that question lies the seed of rebalancing. Now reflect, which internal contradiction demands your attention today? Is it the tension between head and heart? Duty and delight? Discipline and discovery? Name that polarity, and imagine them as two dancers circling each other. Watch how their steps mirror or counterpoint one another. Allow their movements to converse. Then join the dance. Feel how, in that joining, the space between them transforms into a third presence, the living bridge of your authentic self. As opposites entwine and alchemize within you, a subtle transformation unfurls. No longer fragmented, you inhabit a dynamic unity, alive to the full spectrum of your being. And while you may never reach a perfect equilibrium, who among us does, you cultivate a resilient, ever-evolving center that holds tension with grace. This center, born of yin and yang, of structure and spontaneity, of shadow and light, becomes the midwife for your true self's emergence. Keep that promise of integration close as you prepare for what lies beyond. For when the chimney of inner opposites cools, when masculine vigor and feminine grace dance without collision, you'll stand ready at the final threshold. There, the self no longer divided but fully alive awaits its unveiling. The emergence of the true self beckons, a self who isn't just balanced, but radiant, unmasked, and wholly free. But before that unveiling, one deeper frontier remains. Are you ready to sense that final whisper from your soul, the call that says, "I am here," and step forward into a life lived without compromise? The true self stirs just beyond the union of your contrasts, waiting for you to claim it. Now, at last, you stand before an open horizon you scarcely dared to imagine. The winds of your inner uprising have blown away so many masks, persona, shadow, inner child's defense, the polarized extremes you once treated as enemies, yet here you are, uncloaked and vulnerable, bathed in a raw light that feels both thrilling and daunting. You've dismantled illusions, brick by brick, and breathed deep the cool air of your own essence. But the question that now rings in your ears is simple, yet seismic. Who will you become once the scaffolding falls away and only the true self remains? Picture yourself emerging from a tunnel where each flickering candle represented a stage of your journey, the flicker of persona awareness, the flare of shadow integration, the gentle glow of inner child healing, the pulsating dance of masculine and feminine energies. And now at the mouth of this tunnel, daylight spills into your vision. It isn't harsh, it is gentle guidance, urging you forward. You feel something shift in your chest, a steady thrum of possibility that signals a new phase. This is not the end of journey, it is the grand opening of your own life's theater, where you both write and perform the script in real time, without pretense, without autopilot. The true self emerges not as a destination but as an ever-evolving creation. Yet freedom from masks carries responsibility. The exhilaration of authenticity can quickly become disorienting if you mistake it for license to do whatever flutters your fancy. True selfhood demands discernment, a capacity to choose with both openness and intention, to craft your life in alignment with your values rather than reaction. Suddenly, every decision, small or monumental, bears weight. Saying yes becomes an act of purpose, saying no becomes a declaration of self-respect. The once invisible boundary between you and the world sharpens into clarity. And within that boundary lies your power, the power to shape experience, to channel creative impulse, to speak your truth with integrity. Let's get practical. You might start your morning not with habitual scrolling or reflexive to-do lists, but with a simple ritual that affirms your authentic intentions. Maybe you light a candle and whisper 3 commitments you intend to honor today: kindness toward yourself, a bold creative step, a moment of deep listening with another. Maybe you breathe into your belly, feeling the pulse of your own presence before the world's demands rush in. These small acts, repeated daily, become the warp and weft of a life woven around your deepest values rather than the fraying threads of old habits. Authenticity, we discover, is not a static state. It's an ongoing creative process, like tending a garden that never stops growing. Some seasons bring blossoms of joy and confidence, others yield storms of doubt and fatigue. You might encounter days when old patterns, the reflex to please, the urge to hide certain feelings, resurface with surprising force. When that happens, don't panic. See it as the weather of your inner climate, signals that a particular area needs attention. Pull out the metaphoric weeds of self-judgment. Water the seedlings of self-compassion. Invite the restless winds of curiosity to blow through the branches of your belief system, shaking loose leaves that no longer serve. Notice how your relationships respond to this unfolding authenticity. Some bonds will deepen, as people who truly resonate with your essence gravitate closer. Conversations feel richer, silence is more comfortable, conflicts less about blame and more about growth. Other ties will loosen, perhaps surprisingly so. You might lose someone who preferred the version of you that played small or fit into their ideal. That loss can sting, yet it also clears space for new connections that honor the fullness of who you are. Trust that the universe is reorganizing itself around your emerging selfhood, pulling you toward people and opportunities that match your authentic frequency. There's a narrative twist here. Becoming your true self doesn't mean arriving at a perfect, unchanging persona. It means owning the fluidity of your own evolution, understanding that life will continually present new challenges, fresh layers to unmask, deeper dimensions to integrate. You remain a work in progress, and rejoice in it. You become the artist of your own metamorphosis, daring to dip your brush into colors that once terrified you. Maybe you express a creative impulse you'd long denied, painting, dancing, writing love letters to life. Or perhaps you finally speak a long-suppressed truth, a piece of your heart you've hidden behind politeness or duty. In each act of self-expression, you reinforce the architecture of your true self, brick by transparent brick. Reflect on your past decisions. How often did you choose expediency over integrity, comfort over curiosity, conformity over courage? Notice how those choices shaped the masks you wore. Then imagine making decisions from this new place of self-authority. You hold a compass calibrated not to fear or obligation, but to your core values: compassion, creativity, authenticity, service, joy. Even when the path ahead seems unfamiliar, that compass points steady north, guiding you through uncertainty with quiet assurance. Trust the tremor in your chest, that felt sense that signals alignment more reliably than any spreadsheet or social metric. As your commitment to authenticity deepens, you'll likely encounter internal resistance, the voice that whispers, "You're not ready, someone will get hurt, what if it's too late?" Recognize that as the echo of past survival strategies, not the voice of your true self. Acknowledge it kindly, then redirect your attention to the felt sense of possibility. Cultivate an inner dialogue that says, "I've faced my shadows and integrated my polarities. I've tended the wounds of my inner child and reclaimed disowned treasures. I am here, now, fully alive. What is my next right action?" In that gentle shift of dialogue, you reclaim agency and consign self-doubt to its proper role, a passing weather condition, not the landscape itself. Living from your true self also transforms how you encounter failure and success. No longer do you hinge your worth on outcomes determined by external measures, promotions, social applause, the tally of likes and shares. Instead, you measure success by alignment. Did I honor my truth? Did I stretch myself into uncharted territory? Did I extend kindness to myself and others? If the answer is yes, even if the result was messy or incomplete, you end the day in quiet triumph. Conversely, when you stray from your values, you might feel a tightening in your chest, a subtle dissonance that signals you've deviated from course. Far from condemning you, this discomfort is a compass corrective, gently nudging you back toward integrity. To sustain this life of authentic alignment, build habits that reinforce awareness. Maybe you journal not just to process the day's events, but to track points of identity drift, moments when you answered a demand without conscious choice. Maybe you schedule monthly check-ins with yourself, reviewing your commitments and celebrating wins that have nothing to do with external approval. You might create an authenticity altar, a small shelf with objects that remind you of your truth, a feather that calls to your lightness, a rock that grounds your strength, a quote that stokes your courage. Each time you glance at these tokens, you reconnect with the promise of your own becoming. There's also a communal aspect to this emergence. True selfhood doesn't isolate you, it links you more deeply to others walking similar paths. You begin to seek out circles where vulnerability is celebrated, where radical honesty replaces small talk, where people hold space for each other's messiness and magic. In these communities, you practice authenticity in real time, test your emerging voice, receive mirrors that reflect both your brilliance and blind spots. And in turn, you offer that mirror to others, becoming a guardian of authenticity in a world that often rewards the polished mask instead. Emotionally, the payoff is profound. You'll feel a surge of vitality, the kind that rises from living in harmony with your own nature rather than subdued by its suppression. You'll notice a new resilience. You weather storms because you're anchored to an internal bedrock, not the shifting sands of external validation. You'll experience intimacy in a richer register, for vulnerability becomes currency, and trust flourishes when you show up as you are. And yes, you'll still feel fear, doubt, and grief, but these emotions lose their sting. They become messengers rather than marauders, guiding you into deeper layers of self-knowing. Philosophically, this emergence of the true self echoes the ancient maxim, know thyself. But it updates it for our era, reminding us that self-knowledge is not a trophy collected at the finish line, but a river we swim in daily. The flowing river invites us to remain fluid, curious, and courageous. It invites us to shape our lives as art rather than architecture, ever responsive to the shifting contours of our inner and outer worlds. It asks us to celebrate paradox. We are both sovereign authors of our destiny and humble participants in a grander dance beyond our full understanding. And so, dear listener, you now face the ultimate dilemma. Will you dare to stay unmasked in a world that often rewards imitation? Will you cultivate the courage to choose alignment even when it demands radical honesty? Will you honor the ongoing creative process of authenticity, allowing yourself to emerge and re-emerge over and over again? Each morning, as you open your eyes, the invitation returns. Today, will you live as the unmasked you, or will you default to the scripts you once learned by heart? The emergence of your true self is no final chapter. It is an opening act in the story of a lifetime, a story authored by the interplay of your deepest values, your unfolding creativity, and your ever-deepening capacity for presence. You may feel exhilaration, fear, wonder, and skepticism all at once. That's precisely the alchemical mix that forges living gold. Trust that you're not alone in this threshold moment. Countless others are stepping into the open air alongside you, bearing their own lights into the darkness of conformity. So pause now, take a deep breath, and place your hand over your heart. Feel the gentle rise and fall of your chest. Hear the whisper of possibility. Your life awaits, uncharted and unmasked. And remember, the true self isn't a final garment you slip into, it's the ever-evolving canvas of your choices, your commitments, your creative acts of self-expression. As you step forward, each word you speak, each gesture you make, each boundary you draw becomes a brushstroke on the tapestry of your becoming. Today, the stage is bare. No scripts. No spotlights. Just you, deciding in each moment to live in the authenticity you fought so hard to reclaim. How will you express your true self in the hours that follow? What honest word or bold action will you choose? The world is waiting, not for a perfected mask, but for the raw, radiant presence of you. Will you dare to stay unmasked? Your next breath holds the answer. You stand now at the edge of everything you thought you knew, toes curled over the lip of who you've been, gazing into the uncharted expanse of who you might become. Feel the thrum of possibility beneath your feet, an electric pulse reminding you that masks can slip, defenses can fall, and a raw, unvarnished self waits just beyond the final scaffold of old identities. You've walked a crucible of transformation. You lifted the glossy veneer of the persona and tasted the cool wind of authenticity. You listened in silence until the voice within spoke with clarity. You descended into the shadow's murky depths and retrieved its hidden treasures. You knelt in gentle compassion before your wounded inner child and offered healing. You danced the tension of opposites until harmony emerged. And now, at last, the true self beckons, unmasked and incandescent. And yet, this moment is both an ending and a beginning, an invitation to an unending journey that demands daily courage, fierce curiosity, and tender self-compassion. I invite you to lean into this threshold space, feel its weight and its lightness at once. Notice how the air tastes different when you no longer inhabit borrowed roles. Notice the echoes of old fears that whisper, "Better the devil you know," and the tremor of new courage that answers, "But what if I fly?" The paradox is exquisite. To live unmasked is to accept that vulnerability is the highest form of power. It is to stand in your full spectrum, joy and grief, anger and compassion, certainty and wonder, and declare that every hue is essential to the masterpiece of your being. Today, as you close your eyes and breathe into that tremor, ask yourself, which mask will you discard now? Perhaps it is the mask of people-pleasing, worn so long you forgot how to say no. Perhaps it is the mask of invincibility, polished thin by the anxiety of being seen as weak. Perhaps it is the mask of indifference, which stifles longing and dims the sparkle of authentic desire. Whatever script you've been reciting on autopilot, scripted by parents, peers, or your own survival strategies, imagine yourself scrunching it into a ball and tossing it aside. Feel the release in your shoulders, the lift in your chest, the flicker of hope that rises like dawn behind closed eyelids. And then listen for the tender voice that emerges in the silence. What piece of your truth longs to speak? Maybe it is a whispered passion for painting at sunrise, a confession of love you've hidden behind casual smiles, a bold dream you shelved because it felt impractical. That fragment of you has been waiting, sometimes shouting in dreams, sometimes humbling itself in moments of quiet sorrow. Today, let it have its say. Write those words on a scrap of paper, speak them aloud in your car or shower, send them as a message to someone you trust or keep them as a secret vow. Honor that truth as the spark that lights your next step. The practical challenge before you is simple yet profound. Choose one small honest action today that reveals the real you. Perhaps it's telling a friend, "I need help," when you've always prided yourself on doing it alone. Maybe it's expressing, "I disagree," in a meeting where you've swallowed dissent to keep the peace. Maybe it's granting yourself permission to rest instead of ticking another box on your to-do list. Whatever you choose, witness how your heart responds. Does it flutter with fear, or does it swell with relief? Notice how the world shifts around you when you refuse to hide behind the worn facade of acceptable. You may be surprised at how much lighter your spirit feels, how deeply you breathe, how close connection follows genuine transparency. Remember, unmasking is not a one-off gesture but a daily art form. Each morning, you have the chance to recalibrate, to align your actions with your deepest values, to pare away scripts that no longer serve, to tune your barometer to inner guidance rather than external applause. Let your morning coffee or tea become a ritual of intention. As the steam curls in your palms, speak aloud 3 simple commitments, perhaps to speak truth, to show kindness, to listen deeply. Let these spoken words anchor you whenever you feel the old masks creeping back into place. Embrace the truth that every choice you make ripples outward. When you choose authenticity in one small moment, you not only reclaim your own aliveness but also grant others permission to descend from their own pedestals of pretense. Your courage becomes a beacon, inviting someone else to lower their guard, to share their hidden fear, to admit that they, too, have worn a mask that no longer fits. In that shared vulnerability, a web of intimacy is woven, fraught, imperfect, and infinitely richer than the brittle safety of mutual facades. Yet do not romanticize this path as a smooth highway. You will stumble. Old fears will rise like ghosts demanding to be seen. You may feel isolated when familiar connections falter under the glare of your rawness. You may question if the risk is worth it when the approval you once relied on dissolves. Lean into those moments. Let them be the dark nights of your soul that precede a new dawn. Each tremor of doubt is an echo of your own depth, insistently reminding you that something profound is shifting. Hold firm, and you will emerge on the other side with an inner bedrock resilient enough to sustain both triumph and trial. Ask yourself now, how will you honor the emergent self when the world demands the safety of masks? When you receive an invitation that tempts you back into old roles, will you politely decline, or will you unearth the nerve to propose something more aligned with your truth? When you face a crisis that ordinarily would send you scurrying into the comfort of familiar scripts, will you resist and choose presence instead? These slivers of decision, strung together, form the tapestry of a life unmasked. They rewrite your story in vibrant ink, not the faded pencil lines of borrowed tales. Philosophically, the journey of individuation is a lifelong pilgrimage. There is no final arrival, no moment when you can hang up your cloak of curiosity and say, "I have found myself." Rather, selfhood blossoms in cycles, sprouts of insight, blossoms of embodiment, withering of outdated facets, and rebirth of deeper strains of authenticity. Celebrate each phase. Greet each fresh insight as an old friend returning after a long absence. Nurture the humility to know that there is always more terrain of the self awaiting exploration, more layers to peel, more masks to lay to rest. As an exercise in reflection, imagine yourself at the end of your life, gazing back at this very threshold moment. What regrets would haunt you if you let fear keep you masked? How would you feel if you never spoke that one truth, never claimed that one dream, never embraced that one part of yourself? Let the pull of that future perspective fuel your presence today. Let it lend weight to the small honest action you choose. Embody the courage of your future self who looks back and smiles, grateful that you dared. And as you integrate this practice, you'll notice incremental shifts in your rhythm with the world. Meetings become stages for authentic contribution instead of performance anxiety. Family dinners turn into spaces of genuine exchange rather than polite repetition of roles. Even solitary moments, commutes, chores, evening wind down, become fertile grounds for checking in with your truth. Is this moment aligned with who I intend to be? You'll ask yourself, and that single question, repeated like a sacred mantra, will guide you away from the autopilot of masks and toward the intentionality of unmasked presence. Know, too, that your emergence is part of a collective awakening. Every person who chooses authenticity makes the tapestry of human connection more vibrant, more resilient, more capable of bearing the full spectrum of our shared humanity. Your unmasked life is not mere individual liberation, it is a gift to the world, proof that it is possible to navigate chaos with integrity, to own shadow without shame, to honor the inner child without regressing. With each act of alignment, you amplify the call for a culture that values nuance over dogma, compassion over judgment, depth over surface. So, dear soul at the threshold, will you dare to remain unmasked? Will you meet each sunrise as both question and answer, both unfolding mystery and conscious creator of your own narrative? Will you, when the masks press heavy around you, pause and whisper, "This is not my truth," and gently set them aside? Will you choose the tremor of fear that leads to freedom over the hollow comfort of pretense? Take a breath now, slow and deep, and feel the subtle trembling of your spine. That is your spine of courage. Place a hand over your heart and listen. There, beneath the clamor of old scripts, beats the steady drum of your authentic self. In that resonance lies all the guidance you ever need. Let its cadence lead you through the rest of your unfolding story. The world does not need another masked performer reciting lines written by someone else. It needs you, unfiltered, evolving, alive with the messy, radiant truth of your being. Your next choice, no matter how small, becomes a brushstroke on the canvas of possibility. And as long as you breathe, you have the power to choose unmasking, to choose authenticity, to choose the ever-unfolding miracle of your own becoming. Which mask will you shed today? Which secret truth will you finally set free? The moment is now. Your life, unmasked, awaits its next chapter.